People always ask me, what's the worst thing that's ever happened to you? And they usually expect some gory operating room story, something about a malpractice suit or a rare neurological disorder. But honestly, the worst day of my life, the day that broke me and Julian, happened not in a hospital, but 40,000 feet up in the air, right in the first-class cabin of our own airline. It was a slap, a cold, calculated, shocking sound that cut through the silence of the jet. But it was so much more than just a physical blow. It was the sound of a lifetime of microaggressions finally hitting the wall, and me just standing. There I was, 8 months pregnant then, flying home from a conference in London, exhausted, but euphoric after delivering a keynote on deep brain stimulation. Real professional high, Julian, my husband, had insisted I take one of the private suites on Skyline Commerce Air, which he practically owns. By the way, from LHR back to Lax, I was in Suite 1A, wearing a loose navy maternity dress, comfortable flats, definitely not dripping in diamonds or showing off. I looked like what I was, working professional mom-to-be, who just wanted to rest. The moment I boarded, I felt the familiar weight, the almost imperceptible shift in the air that black professionals get used to. That split-second calibration. When someone sees your skin and your surroundings don't match their expectations. It came from Mrs. Carol Davies, the head purser. Carol was this woman with a severe blonde bun, a tight, almost military uniform, and a face that looked like it hadn't smiled since the Clinton administration. She was a 20-year veteran. You could tell she felt she owned that cabin. She checked my boarding pass, her eyes flicking from my title. Dr. Zara Vance to my face, then back to the title. I heard the tiny huff, the little puff of disapproval, before she cleared her throat and said, "Welcome aboard, Doctor. ... Are you quite sure this is your correct assigned seat? 1A? I just smiled, held up my phone, showing the digital pass, and said, "Perfectly sure, Carol. Thank you." She didn't look at the screen, just gave this crisp, dismissive nod and walked away. And I remember thinking, here we go again. For the next 2 hours, it was a masterclass in subtle, weaponized professionalism. She wouldn't serve me herself. It was always the junior attendant, a sweet young woman named Maria, who got my requests. When I politely requested an extra pillow for my lower back, Panamine, 8 months pregnant, traveling transatlantic Carol was right there, intercepting Maria. 1 pillow per passenger, Maria. We have standards to maintain for the long flight. Then, 10 minutes later, I watched her practically tuck Mr. Harrison, this silver-haired banking executive, into his seat with 4 pillows and a cashmere throw, laughing at his terrible jokes. It was the contrast that killed me. The deliberate cruelty of conditional service. The lowest point, before the lowest point, was when the nausea hit. I pressed the call button. I just needed some ginger ale, maybe some crackers. Carol finally appears, her face set in stone. "Yes, doctor?" I explain the nausea, ask for the ginger ale. The scheduled mid-flight service begins in exactly 45 minutes. "Doctor," she chirps, completely deadpan. We adhere to a schedule to ensure the optimal experience for all our first-class guests. Fine, 45 minutes. But then, literally, 3 minutes later, Mr. Harrison rings his bell for a top-up of his 18-year-old single malt scotch. Carol swoops over, all warmth and smiles, saying, "Of course, Mr. Harrison, right away. May I suggest a fresh bowl of salted cashews with that?" No mention of the schedule, no hesitation, nothing. That's the invisible toll of discrimination, you see. It's not usually a burning cross. It's the quiet, constant erosion of your dignity. It's the reminder that your achievement and your wealth only grant you conditional access. And I'm sitting there, trying to practice the breathing techniques I use during a complicated craniotomy, thinking I don't belong here. Not really. The real drama, the moment everything exploded, happened during the final descent into LAX. We're 10 minutes out, the seatbelt sign was on, but my bladder rather, the baby decided it was D-Day. It wasn't discomfort anymore, it was pain. I pressed the call button, trying to be calm. Carol appears, looking furious. "Dr. Vance, the seatbelt sign is illuminated." I understand, Carol, but this is a medical necessity, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. I'm 8 months pregnant, and I need to use the lavatory now. I just need 30 seconds, please. She stood there, blocking the suite entrance, a wall of pure, institutionalized resentment. I cannot allow that. FAR regulations mandate all passengers remain seated for final approach. Rules are rules for everyone. I am a physician, Carol. I shot back, the control finally cracking. I am telling you this is a risk for a urinary tract infection, which can trigger preterm labor. This is not about comfort. It's about my health and my baby's safety. She leaned in close, her voice dropping, but laced with a venom that cut through the hushed cabin. You people always think your little status symbols make the rules bend just for you, don't you? Well, not on my flight, you people. That phrase, it just hung there, raw and ugly. All the years of biting my tongue, all the times I'd smiled through the disrespect, all the exhaustion from having to be twice as good just to be considered equal. It all condensed into that one moment. My status, I said, rising slowly. Ignoring her physical presence, maintaining eye contact, is that of a paying first-class customer, a highly respected surgeon, and a woman carrying a child. And your behavior is a textbook example of professional misconduct and racial bias. That was the line. I saw the 20 years of simmering resentment in her eyes, the perceived slights, the meager pension, the younger, more diverse staff getting promoted. It all boiled over, focused entirely on me. The pregnant black woman who dared to challenge her authority and her gatekeeping. She didn't even yell. She just lifted her hand, a swift, sharp crack right across my cheek. Asterisk, the silence that followed was deafening. I just froze, my hand flying to my face, not believing it had happened. My only thought being for the baby, please be okay, little one. Then the cabin erupted. Ben Carter, the young software developer across the aisle, who'd been quietly filming since the ginger ale incident, shouted, "I got it. I got the whole thing on video." Mr. Harrison, even he, was horrified, shouting, "You assaulted a pregnant woman, on camera." Jennifer, the head purser, who had intervened earlier, ran into the cabin, her face pale. She took one look at my red, stinging cheek and Carol's defensive snarl, and her eyes widened. She knows this is a catastrophe, I thought. But the real, deeply satisfying cinematic moment came about 20 minutes later after we'd landed. I was sitting in the private executive lounge with Julian's coup, who was apologizing profusely. While Carol was held back on the plane, Julian walks in, all 6'4" of him, impeccably dressed, radiating a contained Arctic fury that only I truly recognized. He came straight to me, checked my face, held me close, and then turned to the coup. Zara tells me the attendant's name is Carol Davies. His voice was low, measured, and terrifying. I want her brought here now. The door opens, and Carol is escorted in by security. She's shaking, her tight bun loose, her face the color of ash. She sees Julian, and her eyes register shock. I've only seen his portrait in the annual reports. Then she sees me, and the last piece of the puzzle clicks into place.
Ow.
Her entire worldview collapses right there in the marble-floored lounge. "Mrs. Davies," Julian said, his voice quiet, almost kind, which made it worse. "Do you know who this is?" "Yes, sir. That's Dr. Vance." "Dr. Zara Vance Hayes," Julian corrected, emphasizing the name of the man who signs her paychecks. "My wife. My 8-month pregnant wife, whom you subjected to hours of discriminatory service, blocked from using the restroom, and then struck in front of a dozen witnesses. She tried to scramble, tried to apologize, mumbled something about a misunderstanding, about safety, about her 20 years of loyal service, her low pension, her life falling apart. But Julian cut her off, not with a shout, but with the cold, precise language of ultimate authority. "The moment you put your hands on my wife, Mrs. Davies, your employment with Skyline Commerce Air ended. No severance, no references, no contest from the union. You've assaulted a passenger, and you've failed on the most fundamental level of human dignity. This is not negotiable. This is done." It was the most satisfying moment, not because she was fired honestly. I felt a flicker of pity for her ruined life, but because she finally had to confront the why. When Julian asked her, point blank, "Would you have treated her this way?" "If you had known she was married to the chairman, she couldn't meet my eyes." She whispered, "No, sir. I would have treated her like royalty." "Exactly," I said, finally finding my voice, holding Julian's hand. "That's the entire problem, Carol. Dignity should be the default, not a privilege reserved for royalty or people who look like Mr. Harrison. You mistreated me because I didn't fit your prejudice of who belongs, and that is a cancer we are cutting. Out of this company, starting tonight." The cinematic ending came 2 days later after the video went viral. Julian, standing at the podium, looking exhausted but determined, didn't just apologize. He announced that Skyline Commerce Air was grounding its entire global fleet for 48 hours, 2 whole days, costing hundreds of millions to conduct mandatory deep-dive anti-bias training for every single customer-facing employee, saying the cost of dignity is non-negotiable. It was a statement, a reckoning that sent shockwaves through the entire industry. And it all started with a simple, ugly slap. Now, a year later, our son Julian Jr. is a chunky, happy toddler. And Julian has since created the Service Equity Division, an entire department dedicated to auditing service quality across demographics. I even help run a lot of the training, which is now mandatory industry-wide. But here's the open question, the controversial part I still wrestle with. Was Julian's response, shutting down a global airline, ruining Carol's life, spending millions justice, or was it just the ultimate flex of power? Did we really change anything systemically? Or did we just send the message that power protects dignity, and without it, you're still exposed? I often wonder if Carol, now working a minimum wage job somewhere, really changed her heart, or if she just learned the new rule, don't mess with the boss's wife. What do you think? Tell me in the comments below. Was this necessary justice? Or was it a terrifying overreach of corporate power? Have you ever had your dignity denied, only to be restored because someone with authority stepped in? Let's talk about it. And don't forget to like this video and subscribe so you don't miss the next time I break down a moment that changed everything.